This is SportsJam. I'm Doug Doyle. I'm thrilled to have one of the finest actors, singers, and Broadway performers joining me today on the show. Two-time Tony Award winner Norbert Leo Butz, who is currently portraying former New England Patriots coach Bill Belichick in the FX 10-part series American Sports Story, Aaron Hernandez. The series charts the rise and fall of NFL superstar Aaron Hernandez and explores his identity, his family, his football career, his murder conviction, and eventual suicide in prison, as well as his legacy in sports and American culture. Norbert, great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Doug. It's fun to be here.
Bill Belichick may be the most liked, disliked, misunderstood, mysterious, soon to be Hall of Fame coaches of all time. Most of us have seen how gruff and sometimes disinterested he's been with the media at news conferences, the scowl on his face and his famous Patriots hoodies on the sideline. But no one can deny his genius as a football coach. Before we talk about your research for the part, how did this role of Bill Belichick come to you?
Sometimes in this business, Doug, things just literally fall out of the sky. There are certain roles you got to, really fight for and audition for and have meetings for and really advocate for. And then there's other times when the acting gods just drop a great part in your lap. I think I was on Ryan Murphy's radar. He's a big Broadway fan. I think I had auditioned for one of his many other shows. My agent called me. Now, this is a couple of years ago now, and said, "Hey, you're on a very short list to play Bill Belichick in this Aaron Hernandez series based on the podcast." And my first response, and I'm ashamed to say this, is like, remind me who Bill Belichick is. I'm a big baseball fan. I've never followed the NFL really closely. Watch the Super Bowl, watch the playoffs at times, but I've never really followed and surely not followed the Patriots. So my work was cut out for me. But I think my lack of insider football knowledge kind of helped me. I think the guy is such an enormous icon, a huge figure, that I think if I had that, if he loomed large in my imagination, I think I would have been too intimidated, frankly, to play him. But I was able to approach him just like I would any other character and found him to be absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, it seems to make a lot of sense, Norbert, the fact that you kind of came with a clean slate to this part. And I understand you learned a great deal while preparing for this part. Were you surprised at the real Bill Belichick?
Without a doubt. And listen, I took a stab. I did NFL boot camp. A friend of mine works at ESPN, so we started from positions, and then we went into everything from scouting to remind me what special teams are, and I had a lot to learn. I figured out very soon. I'm smart enough to know what I don't know. There was no way I was going to be able to even make an indentation on Bill Belichick's knowledge of the sport. I do think he's a genius. I think he's almost a savant. The guy is the son of course, Steve Belichick, who was a coach at Navy, wrote the first real manual on how to scout football players in the 1940s and 50s, changed the sport. The guy was, from the time he was 5 years old, he was raised on a football field. I was never going to be able to get that kind of knowledge. And my first real into Belichick, besides looking at there's a ton of footage to look at him. And as you had said in your intro, right, there's such a mask on the guy. There's this stoic, gruff exterior. But there's a great book by David Halberstam, a Belichick biography, a great sports writer, David Halberstam. And that book really opened him up for me. I knew I was never going to be able to get his football knowledge. As an actor, you try to find that commonality with a character. This was a character very far from me. But Belichick grew up, his father was the biggest influence on his life, right? Not just in the sport of football, but just as a man, right? His dad was the son of Czech immigrants. My dad is the son of German immigrants. That's why I got this weird ass name. Um, I worshiped my dad. He was just foundational for me. And I think our dads raised us in similar ways. So I started with his childhood, really, and I started with his family background. That kind of when you're raised by a first generation emigree, there's this very the work ethic is just off the charts, right? The conservative values are just so firmly in place. I don't mean politically conservative necessarily, but I just mean this idea that you're entitled to nothing. It's all about what you're putting into something. Um, my dad was very much that kind of a father. Um, and and that's how I was really able to get into the guy. And then the other thing I would say is I was able to make a correlation between professional sports and Hollywood and my industry, both cutthroat industries, both hugely competitive, right? Requiring, you know, blood, sweat, and tears. You know, it's just such a dog eat dog environment. And when I was able to kind of make, we call them enacting substitutions, if you will, right? I'm like, oh, right. Yeah. If a coach has a losing season, he's out. If your show's not getting the ratings, you're canceled. If the Broadway shows, there's no job security. It's all about the deep love and commitment of the sport or of the performing. Um, and that's when I was able to go, okay. And I've worked with hugely, um, you know, uh, narcissistic, really difficult personalities. Um, and I think you find that at the top of whatever industry you're in. So those were the types of things that were in my mind as I was playing in.
And you had a brief encounter with Bill Belichick years ago.
Doug, I believe I did. Um, and I say I believe I did because it's going back a few years now and it's kind of hazy. So about it's from 2015 to 2018. I was on a television show called Bloodline, and we shot down in the Florida Keys. Um, and my co-star in that series was Kyle Chandler, who famously played the coach in Friday Night Lights, um, of which Bill Belichick was a huge fan of. Not surprisingly, right? Belichick famously in the off season loves to fish, spent a lot of time in the Florida Keys and was down there and wanted to say hi to Kyle and came to set one day. And at the time, I didn't know Belichick, obviously, oh, right, that guy that stands on the sidelines with the cutoff hoodies and the gruff exterior. But he came to set one day and I got annoyed. As an actor, I usually get annoyed when people come to set. I'm very Belichicky in this way. Belichick would hate it if, a celebrity was right. Anything that sort of takes the focus off of what the task is that day. And I remember the crew being all abuzz, like, "Oh my God, you know who that is? You know who that is?" And I was like, "Guys, F that guy, man. We got work to do here." So, um, but I called Kyle when I was researching the part and I just said, "Hey, let's talk about Belichick. I'm getting ready to play him." And he had some really great stories. They had become friendly over the years.
I love it. I love it. So I have to ask you, this series really deals with some very emotional and difficult circumstances surrounding the life of the late Patriots tight end Aaron Hernandez. Knowing this is based on a true story, what was the mood like on the set, Norbert?
Well, in my experience, when you're doing, there's no getting around the fact it's heavy subject matter, very heavy subject matter. Um, it's a tragedy. It's an American tragedy. This kid had so much promise, such a gifted athlete, had been given every advantage in the world, but the childhood was really toxic. The parenting was really toxic. The environment that he was in, um, very few people would be able to escape. But I find that when you're doing super heavy stuff, a lot of times what helps is to keep the set light, is to actually. So we actually had a lot of fun. Um, we all spent a lot of time in that hair and makeup trailer. Josh Rivera, who plays Aaron, was in that trailer 4 to 5 hours a day, getting all that tattoo work done. Right, Hernandez famously was fully tatted. As Belichick, they had to rough my face up. I had to have this bald cap and then this like comb over put on my head, and I needed to have like 30 more pounds on me. So I was like stuffed into this kind of like bulky suit. And when you're doing all, you're in the trenches there, and we're listening to fun playlists and talking about sports and laughing. And so it helps when you're doing that super heavy stuff to keep it light, which we did. Having said that, they were really long, hard work days, um, especially for Josh. Man, I can't say enough about this young actor. He just really, really put it out there. It was a thrill for me. Um, a lot of the guys playing the players, it was fascinating, Doug. And this really spoke to me of how revered Belichick is. When I was in the getup and I had the makeup and I had the hair and I had the voice and the body, I would walk onto these football fields. A lot of these guys had played college ball. Some of them had even, been in the NFL or adjacent to the NFL, maybe practice squads, maybe European football. A lot of them had really played the sport. And when I would come on set, they'd say, "Hey, coach, hey, coach." They'd instantly start calling me coach, right? They'd want pictures of me. And I would have to say to them, I'm not really Bill Belichick, but it was just the idea of the man, right? They parted ways for me. And it was sort of a method acting experience where it's like, once you're treated like that, you then can begin to act like you do have that power and authority. And Belichick's great strength was his leadership um, through his reticence. He was stingy with praise. He was held his cards very close to his chest. But I think that was all strategic. I think it was all strategic in trying to um, keep the players focused on the football game and not on uh, pleasing him, not on endorsements. The man was just obsessed with the sport and knew that the way you win ball games is to give nothing away. His favorite book famously is called The Art of War, which is that ancient text all about um, um, how to beat an opponent, right? And it's that you give nothing away so you can have everything to your advantage. Um, that's how he coached.
To your credit, and correct me if I'm wrong, the first time we see you, you're not speaking. You're at the news conference, and right away I said, "Well, that's Bill Belichick," and then it's like that's Norbert playing Bill Belichick later, but so you really captured his look and his demeanor right away at the news conference. What has been the best reaction you've got to your role as Bill Belichick from somebody that has watched the series? It's still going on. We have 10 parts to go.
Yeah,
Total of 10 parts.
yeah. The best reaction I think that I've gotten, as I sort of alluded to before, was actually on set. It would be this moment where people would recognize right away that I was Bill Belichick, and I looked different than him or whatever, but just the idea of the man made people stop in their tracks. People would honk their horns if we were shooting, in a public area. Um, he just he he had gained such respect. Of course, there were the detractors. Where you had asked me before we started filming, about my dad. My dad did pass away about, I guess it's been about 10 years now. I've thought a lot about my dad. I wish he was alive because he was the biggest football fan. We're from St. Louis, Missouri. We don't have a franchise anymore, but he was there when we were still the St. Louis Cardinals, and then the Rams, obviously. And
Oh,
my
he would
dad,
have been excited for you,
oh, he
man.
would have loved this moment. My dad has a lot of Belichickian qualities to him, and
Wow.
so Yeah.
You ran track and you played soccer up to about the age of 15. But you ran track. So you've always been athletic. And of course, as a Broadway performer, you have to be in wonderful shape. Most people know you from your iconic roles on Broadway. I first saw you when I took my daughter to see the original cast of Wicked back in 2003.
Uh,
It was her first musical, and to this day, now a mom, a special ed education teacher, she will never forget that experience. She knows every word of each song, and that includes your performance as Fiyero, Elphaba's love interest. Dancing through life, she can still sing the whole song. As long as you're mine, she can still sing the whole song. And you know what? So can I. And then now you're part of Broadway history. You've also won Tony Awards for playing the FBI agent Carl Hanratty in Catch Me If You Can, and alongside John Lithgow and Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. Both you won for Best Lead Actor in a Musical Drama, and that's only been done by 8 other people, by the way. So he is in rare territory. How often do you think about Fiyero and working with Idina Menzel and Kristen Chenoweth in Wicked?
yeah, a lot these days because, of course, there's this huge movie coming out in a few weeks, a couple of weeks, and next week we're actually going to the premiere, and I'll see those guys again. And whenever we last year, Wicked had its 20th anniversary Broadway party, and we all get together then. We were talking before about this, the commonality between performing at a high level like Broadway and the NFL, and this the bonding that happens between your teammates and between your castmates. It's just a lifelong thing. It's a lifelong thing. So I love those ladies. That entire original company, when we see each other, it can be years since we've seen each other, and we pick right up. It's that kind of a bond. We root for each other, because putting that show together was hard. It wasn't working out of town. They had to rewrite it. People were replaced. It opened on Broadway. The first reviews were not great. There were injuries. They just the whole slate of obstacles. And 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 like a coach, the director just has to kind of problem solve. Okay, this isn't working. We got to cut this and move this around. We need to replace this actor. We need to change this scene. And Wicked, when you're putting together a new show, it's like putting together a championship team. And so, yeah, we're a part of that history. I'm super proud of it. You mentioned your daughter. I have 3 daughters. They were raised backstage at Wicked. And in fact, my eldest daughter is studying to be, she was a special ed teacher. Now she's getting her master's in social work. So our kids have, it sounds like a lot in common. And that show was really seminal to them. It speaks to girls. It's about the empowerment of being a girl, the empowerment of female friendship through dark times. And so I love that our girls have that.
Yeah, and Casey sends her love, and now we have little Liam, who's a month old. He will be a Wicked fan, and he
Of
will
course.
be.
And
She will hear he will hear her singing all these things. You did mention the movie. Jonathan Bailey's going to play Fiyero. Is it going to be hard for you to watch this movie a little bit?
oh God, no. You mean in terms of like that I would be jealous in some way
Well,
or
not
sort
jealous, but it's like you created this role. You are Fiyero.
yes, I was Fiero when I was a much younger man, and so no, it's someone else's turn, and it's more of a feeling of pride. You do a lot. I've done a ton of stuff, Doug.
You really have.
I've worked in all kinds of mediums, and as actors, kind of as ball players too. You do the best you can, but ultimately you have very little control over the results, right? There are so many variables that get a team from, I'm a a fan, right? From spring training to we're getting ready to go to the World Series. There's a million um, uh, uh, things that have to fall into place to get there, and most of them are out of your control. It's mostly out of your control whether a film or a TV show or a Broadway show is successful, right? Well, you do the best you can, but when something does get legs and does have a life and lasts 20, 25 years, it's a real feeling of pride, right? Like, oh, I was a part of something that's lasting. There's a legacy here, and of course that means a ton.
I know you have to run, but I have to ask you. Uh, It's too bad that Bill Belichick never was a singer, because you would have that down. You are an amazing singer, and those who have not only not I'm not just talking Broadway now. I'm talking about, if you listen to him, you've seen him perform, or you listen to albums that he's on. He's on a various award-winning albums for the shows, but just singing in general. When did you know that you had this talent? When did you first start singing?
Yeah, so I'm from a pretty musical family. My parents were very, very religious, and so we were raised with a lot of church. And you're in church, that means you're singing. But I was a real shy kid. I had to be told by teachers that I could sing, and then my teacher told my parents, "Hey, he can really sing. You should get him more training." I always say this when people ask that question. I am so indebted to the educators in my life. Like I said, I was not. I'm one of 11 kids. I'm the seventh. I got kind of lost in the shuffle there. I wasn't like a big show off kid. I was real shy and quiet and very studious. Um, and teachers would hear me sing, or the choir director would hear me sing, "Hey, come a little closer. Hey, do this little solo here." So I was constantly being given opportunities by people that knew I had a gift before I did. And it took me a long time to catch up. You know, um, I guess in my teenage years, I started to get really serious about music. I was studying piano and voice and guitar, and in bands and in choir and in doing shows, and music just became this is my whole world. And you're very lucky when you're a young person and you find something like football, or you find something like broadcasting or podcasting, and you're whatever that thing is, it can really save a teenager. And that's what music did for me. So, it's my great joy in this life.
Boy, we glad your choir director heard you and said, "Come on a little closer," or
Yeah, yeah.
we wouldn't have Fiyero and Wicked, and we wouldn't have a two-time Tony Award winner joining us from doing all those wonderful shows that I mentioned and so many more. Norbert Leo Butz playing Bill Belichick in the FX 10-part series American Sports Story, Aaron Hernandez. You're doing a great job in that show, and you have provided so much joy to my family, Norbert. Thanks for being a part of this Sports Jam, and it's an honor to speak with you.
Likewise, Doug. Thanks.